I feel like there's a lot of blame for people that have dogs with separation anxiety. So I've heard people say, oh, you caused it because you let the dog sleep on your bed. Well, I just want to, that's not an issue, honestly. It doesn't cause separation anxiety. Loving on your dog does not cause separation anxiety.
This week's episode is proudly sponsored by the Pet Anxiety Summit. Struggling with a stressed-out, anxious pet? Gain exclusive insights from over 21 world-renowned veterinarians and pet care specialists. They'll reveal proven methods to ease your pet's anxiety, paving the way for a happier, more tranquil life. Hosted by Pet Summits and integrative veterinarian Dr. Edward Bassingthwaite. This event is free, but only for a limited time. Mark your calendars so you don't miss the free online Pet Anxiety Summit from September 18th to the 22nd, 2023. Welcome to the Pet Care Report podcast by Pet Summits. Here's your dog training host, Melissa Viera.
Hello and welcome back to the Pet Care Report. I'm here with Ness Jones today to talk about separation anxiety in dogs. Separation anxiety is something that a lot of pet parents struggle with, so it's not uncommon to have some concerns that your dog might be experiencing separation anxiety, and we're going to go into more details about what that is, how to determine if you might need some help with your dog's separation anxiety, and what you can do to help your dog right now. So Ness Jones is a certified separation anxiety pro behavior consultant, as well as a certified dog trainer. Ness also has an applied ethology certification. So Ness, you have a lot of qualifications. In addition, you are also the host of Tales from the Doghouse, Separation Anxiety Explained. So I'm really excited to have you to cover this very important topic. Can you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself and what made you interested in separation anxiety?
Yeah, sure. So thank you for having me as well. I've actually got some more qualifications. I'm actually a canine nutritionist, certified in that, small animal naturopath, and I also do myofunctional therapy, which is basically dog massage. So I do like to take a holistic approach when it comes to dogs with separation anxiety. What made me interested in it? Well, I was a dog trainer for many, many years. Years and years ago, before I even heard the term separation anxiety or before I even became a dog trainer, I had a dog that when we used to go to work, she would dig great big holes, and I'm talking about great big holes into the plasterboard. And we knew, my poor husband had to fix it all up, but we knew it was her. We had two dogs, and she was the one that had powder all over her snout and her feet, her legs. So she had an issue with it as well. But then I just think it's an area where a lot of trainers aren't, I don't want to say skilled because that's not the right word, but maybe haven't upskilled in terms of their certification and their understanding of it. Because the beautiful thing about dog training is it is evolving all the time. And I think it's really important to stay up to date with what's happening.
And separation anxiety is a really unique area because the problems are happening when the pet owners aren't there. Do you find that this makes it a little bit challenging to address?
Not really, because I work remotely with my clients, and that is the best way of doing it for myself. It is a unique area, and it's got worse simply because of COVID, would you believe? So with the lockdowns, many dogs came into the homes. Many people adopted dogs during the whole COVID lockdowns, and then those dogs never got the chance to learn to be by themselves. Then life started returning to normal, and suddenly these dogs are like, oh, hang on, this is really weird. I don't like this. I'm not used to this, as mum and dad walk out the door. And even dogs that were fine prior to COVID have actually, some of them, not all of them, obviously, but some of them have developed symptoms of separation anxiety as well. So in terms of the dealing with it, I guess, no, I don't. It's not challenging if it's done properly. So knowing what the dog's baseline is, its threshold, we never push the dog over that threshold because we don't want them to rehearse the behavior. And I guess we should probably mention some of the signs of separation anxiety.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, most common ones would be the barking, howling, crying, those sort of behaviors. But then you've got the other ones, destroying the furniture, destroying belongings, trying to escape around exit points. So you might see damage around the door or the window, things like that. Really excessive fear, I think, leads to things like urination or defecation in the house. So unfortunately, they get so scared they can't control their movements. Some really bad examples are dogs that have jumped out of two-story windows.
Right.
That's really severe. I had one client that was left in the backyard, jumped up onto the shed roof. So there was some things.
Oh, no.
The shed, jumped up on the shed roof, cut its face up really badly, and then proceeded to jump over. It was only a little dog too. Jump over the shed roof, over the fence, and take off down the road. Luckily, they got him back. But yeah, it can be, that fear that the dog has just causes panic, and they lose their thinking brain, I guess, to put it. If you see a dog that's really scared, they're not processing things, they're not learning anything, and they're just terrified. And they just want to be with somebody. Yeah.
Now, with these varying degrees of severity, so I'm sure there are plenty of cases that are much more mild than that, but still very concerning. What can you tell pet owners in order for them to catch this before it gets to that level where the dog is injuring themselves? So if they're showing just minor signs, will that look very similar? What should they look for? Just those minor signs so they can catch it before it gets really scary and dangerous.
I think the thing is not to throw the dog into the deep end. If you understand what their threshold is, what their ability is to cope, then, and it really is understanding their body language as well. So there's things that dogs do that show that they're stressed, or that they're nudging up to full-blown panic, and understanding that, recognizing what they are. But it's got to be specific to your dog, because not every dog behaves the same way. So understanding what that dog does specific to it, those signs of stress. So that comes down to really starting to observe your dog, and making sure, if you know what they look like when they're happy and relaxed, so that you can tell when they don't. Knowing what their eyes look like, their mouth set, their body, their tail, what do they look like when they're having a good time, helps you identify when they're not having a good time and when they're maybe feeling stressed. But some of the maybe less obvious signs of separation anxiety might be things like drooling or heavy panting, or maybe pacing around the house. So they're not maybe vocalizing, they're not destroying anything, but they are showing signs that they're really uncomfortable and they're not having a great time with being home alone. And then we look for the more subtle signs that lead up to them as well. So that could be things like a yawn or a lip lick or a paw lift or whatever it is specific to that dog. And I think understanding, as a small animal naturopath too, I think understanding what your dog looks like when they're healthy and when they're well, it's not just that helps you understand when the dog's feeling ill. So I know when my dog's not feeling well in itself, it's got a dodgy tummy or something like that. But it also goes down to mental health as well. So if you understand what your dog looks like when they're happy, then you can see when they're not happy, if they're feeling anxious. So it's really important. It's one of the key factors of dealing with separation anxiety.
Now, jumping into the causes of separation anxiety, you mentioned a really good one when we did have those lockdowns. It might have been beneficial in some ways to be able to spend all that time with your dog, but then the end result is it's really hard on them when everyone is back to work and the dog has to cope with that. So what can people do right now if maybe they're on summer vacation, or maybe they have a schedule change and they're spending more time with their dog than they expect to typically spend? So how can they structure that in a way that actually prevents separation anxiety?
Yeah, so the first thing is recognizing at what point of their home alone time. Some people, they can walk out the door and the dog's fine for half an hour before they see a reaction. But some dogs start reacting at the 5-minute mark or the 1-minute mark or the 5-second mark. And some dogs, you can't even walk outside the door before, they see a reaction. So if someone is on holidays and they are spending more time with their their pet, the best thing to do is still try to do some absences, but to do it at the level that the dog can cope with. So we never push the dog to the point where they are going to have a have a breakdown, have a meltdown. I think one of the big things that dog caregivers get wrong when they try to do this training is they wait to see the reaction before they return to the home. So even if they're home, like on holidays, try to get outside the door for a little while, but don't push the dog too hard to the point where it starts to go over threshold, because every time it goes over threshold, it basically confirms to the dog that they should be scared. And then the next time mum tries to go out the door, they react even more. So the point is to keep the dog under what level they can cope. And again, that's going to be different for every dog. We don't know. It's going to be specific to your dog. So as I said, some dogs, you can't even get outside the door before you see reaction, and some dogs you've got a bit more of a window to get out.
Right. Now, of course, we're not going to go into the steps of working through this because that's going to be very individualized and we can't give that type of advice in one episode. But do you have any tips for leaving dogs home? So what can they do when dogs are left home in order to help them, whether or not they do have separation anxiety, even a dog that doesn't have separation anxiety? Do you have any favorite techniques for keeping them entertained or content when they're left home?
So I definitely think that there's two things when it comes to separation anxiety that maybe are a little bit overlooked, and because they seem so obvious, but I think a lot of people maybe don't take them as into consideration as much as they should, and they are exercise and enrichment. It seems quite, I don't know, maybe people don't really understand how important they are. So a dog that has had age-appropriate exercise, of course, it's got to be age-appropriate, and the right type of exercise, and that doesn't mean getting onto a skateboard and going at 40 miles an hour. But it needs to be sort of voluntary exercise. So it doesn't have to be that you're going for a jog or a bike ride or anything like that. It could just be that the dog has enough exercise. Exercise is really good because if you think about it, if a person is suffering from, e.g., depression or anxiety, what's the first thing the doctor says? Get outside, get some fresh air, get some exercise. So it's really good for their mental health. And enrichment is equally important because it boosts the dog's confidence, and that's going to help with home alone time. It boosts the dog's optimism as well. And obviously it makes them tired mentally. So when it comes to the time that you need to walk out the door, if the dog has had ample exercise and ample enrichment, they're going to be much more ready to rest. Especially if they, maybe they might be this is particularly important for teenage dogs who've got a lot of energy. They don't know what to do with it often, and they might be the ones that dig holes in the walls. But that sort of thing will help them settle more when you walk out the door. It's quite valuable, I think, to help those dogs. Teenage dogs in particular can be problematic, let's say, because they get bored a lot more easily. They're much more ready to go. And adding in the exercise and enrichment is really, really important. The other thing is people that do have dogs with separation anxiety. So those dogs, what we ask for the guardians to do is to manage their absences. So what that means is don't leave the dog alone until it's to the point that it can cope with home alone time. So because what happens is each time that dog goes over threshold, as I said before, it makes them think, oh, I don't like this. I don't want to be by myself. And that is why one of the myths surrounding separation anxiety is let the dog bark it out. And every single one of my clients that comes to me, I'll say, oh, what have you tried in the past? And they all say, oh, well, the advice was let them bark it out. And I said, how did that work for you? And they said it made it worse. So there's things like that, that would be one thing I would suggest not to do. Don't let them bark it out because it will get worse because they're faced with their fear constantly. So I'm just trying to think of an analogy. Quite like using the dentist analogy. So if you're in the waiting room to go to the dentist, and who wants to go to the dentist? It's pretty yucky, isn't it? So let's say you're in the waiting room, you feel horrible. You go into the dentist, you have a horrible experience, and he says, right, I want to see you again next week. So the next week you're sitting in the dentist's waiting area again, and you feel even worse than you did the week before because you had such a bad experience. So that's what happens when we let them bark it out. The dog gets more, and we see it get worse. So either the behavior escalates or it starts earlier. So.
And I really like the way you worded that. It confirms their belief that there is something to be upset about. Like that's a really nice way of putting it, because that makes a lot of sense when you word it like that.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, it generally doesn't resolve itself.
Yeah.
Anxiety, because they are constantly being exposed to scary absences.
And what about separation anxiety between dogs? So we've talked about separation anxiety from their humans, but are you also working with dogs who might have separation anxiety from their other housemates who happen to be dogs as well?
They do crop up every so often, yeah. So dogs that maybe mum wants to take one of them out for a walk and the other one has to stay at home by itself. And I think that I feel like it's more maybe frustration FOMO based than anxiety based. So the dog is, why are you taking them? Why aren't you taking me? Why isn't the pack staying together? So you do have to do work around that. I probably would approach that slightly differently. So obviously adding in that exercise enrichment, very important. So I don't use food with my separation anxiety clients because I find food complicates the problem. It can complicate the training. So I don't use food because it can become a pre-departure cue, which I don't add until the dog's comfortable for at least 30 minutes. And then it can just, some dogs don't want it because they're too scared, and other dogs will gobble it up, and then they've still got a problem of being home alone. But for dogs in that circumstance where maybe it's more FOMO frustration and it's with another dog, then I might try to factor that. I might try to add in a frozen Kong or something. If they just need a 20-minute window or a 30-minute window, then that might be something I might try, or at least trial it and see if it makes a difference.
Yeah, so a lot of the homework that your separation anxiety clients have is the enrichment and the exercise. So it's not necessarily what they're doing for their dogs when they leave, but it's what they're doing for their dogs in between those departures. It sounds like, anyways.
Yes. Like I said, I like to take a holistic approach. So
yeah,
the exercise and the enrichment do play a part. There's still training involved, obviously. And I mean, it could be things like, so there's a lot of things that can exacerbate the anxiety, and that could be health issues. So a senior dog that's maybe going blind or deaf, or a dog that has allergies, a dog that's having pain, a dog that has gastro issues. So we need to also target their their health and well-being. So that could be looking at their gut health, all those sort of, removing the allergies out of the picture, whatever that looks like, for their treatment protocol. And if there's pain, how can we address the pain? Because all those things can make the training harder for the dog. And then, so that there's that part of it as well. And then there's the actual training. Oh, and of course there's the age of the dog as well. So obviously a young dog's not going to cope as well as a dog that's used to being home alone. Senior dogs have their own issues. But yeah, and then there's the training. So giving the caregivers the step-by-step program so they don't have to think about what the next step is. Because I think that's where people get stuck. They kind of get an idea of what the training should look like, but they don't actually know how to do it. So taking the out of it for them so they can just say, right, this is what I've got a plan here. This is what I have to do, and just do the steps, which will be leaving the dog for short periods, keeping them under threshold. And there's always little things that you have to tailor for their particular circumstances, because people live in different environments. They live in apartments, they live in houses, they live on busy streets, could be whatever it is for that particular family.
Now, do you find that you're also a little bit of a motivational coach for the human clients, trying to keep them on track? I mean, of course, making any lifestyle or habit changes is not always easy. So, what do you have for advice just to keep motivated and to stick to that program and help your dog?
I'm so glad you asked me this question because it's a really big one.
Yeah.
I always hark back to victim blaming because I feel like there's a lot of blame for people that have dogs with separation anxiety. So I've heard people say, oh, you caused it because you let the dog sleep on your bed. Well, I just want to, that's not an issue, honestly. It doesn't cause separation anxiety. Loving on your dog does not cause separation anxiety. I had one lady say that she was blamed by her friend, who was apparently no longer her friend, that her dog had she had caused it because she took her dog out to the park and she groomed it.
Oh my goodness.
I know. So there's a lot of victim blaming. There's also so when you've got a dog with separation anxiety as well, like if you've got a couple in a relationship, they're not always on the same page. So they might be saying, it's just a dog, just, don't worry about it, just get rid of it, or, whatever it is, or, you need to sort this out. I don't want anything to do with it. So it can be really hard emotionally for these people. Maybe their family and their friends don't understand because they realize that they have to manage their absences, make sure the dog's not left alone until it can cope with that home alone time. And so they're cancelling on their friends and their social engagements and all that sort of stuff. So then they say, well, you value the dog more over me than blah, blah, blah. So from my perspective, I'm not a counsellor, but I like to support them through that part of it because I understand how hard it is and I understand the victim blaming. And then, of course, as you say, the training is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It does take time. It's not like a teaching and obedience exercise. You can do that in 5 minutes. It's a long road. Same with a dog with, aggression issues. You can't fix them in a 5-minute session. It does take time. It can take, depending on the dog, it can take many months. And it's the dog guardian that has to do the training. I can give them the steps. I can tailor the steps for them specifically and tell them exactly what to do so they don't have to think about it. But they are the ones that have to do the ins and outs and walking and leaving the dog. And it's a long road. So, yeah, I do support them through that, definitely, and encourage them. And often I find that, maybe 3 months in, they're like, oh, I feel like we're not getting anywhere. And I'm like, look, you couldn't step outside the door for 1 second. And now you're on half an hour or an hour or whatever it is. Obviously each dog goes at a different pace. So
Right.
helping them reflect back on where they started as well is really important.
Yeah, and like you said, there's no one size fits all for this. So you're really tailoring your program, it sounds like, for the individual clients, not just for the dogs, but for the circumstances of the people as well, which is very compassionate and lovely to hear.
Yeah, you have to be empathetic towards the client because, it's apart from their relationship with their family and friends and maybe their partner. Can you imagine? I mean, I know what it was like because I went through this.
Yeah.
Having to walk out the door thinking, is my dog going to be panicking? Is my dog going to be stressed? I feel guilty because I'm leaving my dog home alone to be in this state where it's panicking. It's, it's barking and it's howling and it's panting and it's shaking. All those things, it's horrible to think, oh, I'm going to walk out the door and leave my dog to go through that.
Yeah. And as far as it must be so rewarding to help them get to that end result, but I want to be cautious of the word end result because I think a lot of being a trainer, I know a lot of behavioral concerns are lifelong management. You have to really be careful of what you're doing with that dog to make sure that they don't relapse and have those issues again, or just being able to help them navigate those things when they do come up. So do you find that is true with separation anxiety clients as well? So just being really careful that when they do feel really good about it, they're finally leaving their dog, that guilt is gone, but they have to be really careful of relapse. Is that a common thing?
Relapses can definitely happen. It's usually not always, but it's often triggered by something. So it could be maybe the whoever it is moved home. So that could be something. It could be that they stayed at home on holiday for a few weeks with the dog, and then they're going back to work, and suddenly the dog's world has been turned upside down again. So I would do that very mindfully and very slowly. I wouldn't expect the dog to say you went to work for 6 hours, and then you had spent 3 weeks with your dog. I wouldn't expect to have that 6 hours straight away. I would be saying, well, maybe we do some training around that. And I would make sure they do training around that while they're on holidays as well. It could be things like a death in the family, so that can impact a dog as well. And it doesn't have to be a human death. It could be a furry friend death can impact. What else? It could be things like, maybe one of the children leaving to go to university, or it could be somebody coming into the house to live in the home. All these it could be the neighbours next door have got some construction going on that can destabilise them. I had one client, he's a beagle, Benny the Beagle, and he did really, really well. He got up to basically 6 hours home alone time, and he was just fine for months and months and months and months. And then she contacted me and said he had relapsed. But what had happened is she'd gone away for a week, and her partner was looking after him. And she's not really sure what happened, but whatever it was had given him a setback. However, the good news was that she just did some basic training, did a reset, and got him back up to that time really, really quickly. So it wasn't the long, slow process. So when you are building up that time to whatever it is that you need, it does take time. But once you're there, if you do have a relapse, it can be quite quick. The process can be quite quick to get back up to that, because you've got solid foundations, and that's really important, building those foundations.
So it sounds like any major life change or change in that routine is something to be a little bit cautious of if you have a dog who recently worked through some separation anxiety.
Yeah, for sure. Just be mindful, and if remember that if you're stressed, there's a good chance your dog is stressed, because they are so sensitive to our emotions. So any major change in our lives is going to impact largely could impact our ability to de-stress. So yes, it could impact your dog as well.
So earlier in the episode, we talked a little bit about enrichment. And I want to go back to that because I also agree. I think that is super important, but I think there might be some myths around enrichment and what it actually is. So enrichment is not always just giving your dog like the same puzzle as you leave the house. Do you have any really good ideas for enrichment? Just ideas that you've used or clients have used that you think really work out well?
Yeah. So, enrichment for me isn't throwing a ball around in the backyard. And while puzzle toys are all well and good, most dogs, once they figure them out, they're not really being challenged mentally. So enrichment for me might be, it could be basic obedience. It could be something like trick training. But it could also be a little bit harder stuff. So it could be tracking, sniffing, find it games, whether it's with food or a toy. Shaping is a good one because it's really challenging for a dog. I think that's quite a tricky one. There's plenty of resources out there on enrichment. So, but I know people say, what enrichment do you give them? Oh, I threw the ball around in the backyard for half an hour. It's not really mentally challenging. It's good exercise, I guess, but
Right.
really think it's like a mentally challenging. For me, I like something that is going to mentally tire the dog out because they're more ready to rest when you walk out the door.
Absolutely. And what about the things the dogs naturally do? Like my dogs like to dig, and it's not a problem. We just have a designated spot in the yard where they're allowed to dig. So the things they naturally do can be enrichment as well.
Oh, absolutely, yes. So tapping into their genetics is pretty important as well. So, like for example, dachshunds. I just love dachshunds. Or you probably say duck sound. How do the Americans say it different to us? How do you say dachshunds?
I say it the same, dachshunds. I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but yeah.
I've got American friends that say it differently. Dachshunds. something. But anyway, yeah, I mean, they're burrowers. They used to go and send them down the holes to get the badgers, which I think is amazing. Brave little dogs. So, I would be looking at some sort of enrichment that taps into that genetic drive, whether it's burrowing into something, shredding cardboard, burrowing into a box full of things and stuff like that. So tapping into the genetics of a dog. For a maybe a border collie, you might try to take them to herding or something like that. Or if you can't take them herding, if you're not living in that area, you might teach them to do tri-ball or get a big ball that they have to push around in the backyard, but make it tricky for them. So make it so that they have to push it to a certain point or through something.
And it's so much fun to come up with those ideas and to get to know your dog on that level. How fun is that? And it's not expensive. Enrichment is free. You just have to be a little bit creative and get to know your dog, and it can be a lot of fun. I find that a very interesting area for sure.
Yeah, I've got Belgian Shepherds, so they like tracking. They love tracking. I'll lay a track for them. They have to follow where I've stepped, find articles along the track and things like that. So, but that's part of their genetics. They love that sort of thing. So,
yeah, and I'm sure they use a good nap after tracking.
Yes,
it's a nice workout.
Yeah, because they're using those little skills, and they really do want to chill out after that. And that's perfect time to do some training.
So do you have this is a hard question, but do you have any one single tip that you want to share today that would be the most helpful for pet parents who might be already navigating separation anxiety, or even pet parents who might just be questioning if their dogs are having separation anxiety?
So I do actually have a PDF on that second part of the question, which is, how to tell if my dog has separation anxiety. But for dogs that have, or for humans that do have dogs with separation anxiety, one quick tip: try to figure out what your dog's baseline is, what their threshold is. If you're going to do some training on your own, then don't push them over that baseline, and then it literally is building up that time ever so gradually. So we use gradual exposure therapy to safe absences, and the word safe is really important. So as we've said already, as we've discussed, if you're pushing the dog over their ability to cope, you could likely see escalation of that behaviour. Building a village is really important. So if we're not going to leave the dog alone until it can cope with that alone time, then we have to find cover for your dog. And that could mean friends, it could mean family, it could mean doggy daycare, pet sitters, dog walkers, etc., etc. There's lots of ways to troubleshoot that and find people that can help you, even if you think you can't. Because I know a lot of people think that it's, maybe they've moved to a new town, they don't know anybody. You can still do it, even if your dog's aggressive to other dogs or even humans. There are ways to work around that. I think really though, my one big tip is don't give up on your dog. I think that's really important because it is a struggle having a dog with separation anxiety, but it can be fixed. It can be fixed.
I think that's really important for our listeners to hear. There is hope. It can be fixed. And circling back to that PDF, so you do have some resources on your website, and you also help clients virtually. So this is huge because anyone listening can reach out to you. I want to make sure we go over those options of where to find you. So tell us a little bit about the best place to get in touch with you.
Probably just on my website. So it's just nessjones.com. So nice and easy.
Perfect. And we'll also share those links along with this video. So it'll be really easy to find Ness Jones. Just find this video. If you're listening, the video can be found on petsummits.com, and you can just click on the links for Ness Jones and reach out. And she does have that PDF available as well to help you. I believe that's to help determine if your dog does have separation anxiety.
Yeah, it's about, I think it's 40 pages long, and it just goes through what to look for, what might be impacting your dog. So some of the things we mentioned, like the big life changes, looking at health issues, looking at, the body language signs that show that there might be underlying stress, but also the context. So just as a quick example, yawning could be seen as a sign of anxiety, but maybe your dog just woke up, maybe they're feeling sleepy. So looking at the context, so we don't want to necessarily leap to conclusions. We need to look at the bigger picture. Like if the dog is panting, is it just hot or is it stress? So things like that. It's really important to look at the context.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's a really good point. Finding that baseline, like you said, what does my dog look like naturally when they're happy and content versus what they look like when I leave, or probably when you just arrive home too is a really good time to judge that.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have some favorite pet cams. We don't have to go into that, but do you recommend that pet owners get pet cams so they can keep an eye?
Yes, but you don't have to. So there are free and cheap options as well. So if money is a problem, then you could do things like Zoom is free for the first 40 minutes, Skype, but even you can get onto Facebook Live. The only caveat to that is you set up a Facebook Live. You still need two devices, so maybe your iPad or laptop and your phone. And then just make sure that you set the live to only me, because otherwise everybody on your Facebook will be able to watch your dog.
And then you might get some tips for separation anxiety. That might not be so helpful.
Yeah.
So that's actually a great reminder. Don't just listen to the advice of friends and family. They are well-meaning and they love you and they want to help you, but that does not mean they know what is in the best interest of your dog. So contact a professional like Ness, and Ness has a lot of great resources and again does this virtually. So I think you are a perfect resource for anyone navigating this very difficult area.
Yeah, thank you. It's not just so don't get on Dr. Google either.
Oh, yes. That's always a bad idea.
Much misinformation and you will get completely confused because everybody says something different. There's some great dog trainers out there, but also if you are looking for one, go for one that's certified in separation anxiety because, as I said right at the beginning, dog training is evolving constantly and go with certified so that they actually understand what they're dealing with.
Well, this was great, Ness. Thank you so much for being here. Tell us that website one more time, where to find you.
NessJones.com, and thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. This was great. And if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to give us a review. You can watch this on petsummits.com or find us on Spotify or any of the other podcast listening apps. So give us a review. Let us know what you think, and we'll be back soon. This is the Pet Care Report. I'm Melissa. Thanks for listening.